Hi guys and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Emma. I'm finally getting to the Greek goddesses favorite books video. I've already done one on the Greek gods and I'll have that up there and down below. And now I'm finally getting to the goddesses. I just never got to it, but I'm so glad that I waited because I've read quite a few books since I initially wrote all my notes, so I was able to find some books that just fit a lot better, and I added a few more goddesses because I felt like it. First off is Hera, the queen of the goddesses and the goddess of women and marriage. For this I chose The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. I just recently read this and the stories are great. There are some themes of marriage in here, but it's mostly just about women and relationships, romantic and otherwise. There's quite a bit of like infidelity in the short stories. I don't think Hera would appreciate that much, but it also talks a lot about women. And even though Hera hasn't always been particularly nice to women, specifically those who her husband slept with, I think it's been centuries and I would like to think that she's kind of grown as a person, as a goddess. And I think maybe she understands more that she needs to be supportive of women, and I think this is just like a very nice book for her to read, and I think she would enjoy it. I'm not saying that she has to be like okay with cheating now, but next up is Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, fertility, sacred law, and the harvest. For this I chose Coraline, and I think it's kind of an odd choice, but I'm particularly thinking of like the importance of the garden in Coraline and how that plays a role in the story. And I think it's a spooky book, but it's not like genuinely terrifying. The movie, on the other hand, the movie is a whole other issue. Terrifying. I also think it's kind of cute because Demeter's daughter was originally called Cor, and this is Coraline, and even though it's spelled differently, I think it's just kind of like a cute little connection there. Next up is Athena, the goddess of wisdom, poetry, art, and war strategy, and for this I chose Letters to a Young Poet. These are letters that Rainer Maria Rilke wrote to an aspiring poet, Franz Capus? Something like that? Franz Capus. They're really insightful and well written, and even though they're letters, which are like, I guess, normally prose, they're poetic without full-on being poetry, and it's just, there's nice conversations in there. They're also like a little bit feminist, which is fun, and yeah, I really like them. I also recently found out that it was one of my professor's favorite books, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. He used a quote in class for it, and it was after I had read it, and I was like, wait a minute, I know that one. And yeah, that was just cool. Next up is Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, and for her I chose Lovely War by Julie Berry. This one is a little bit on the nose because it's told from the point of view of Aphrodite for the most part, but it's a really sweet book. It's honestly about love and different kinds of love, and I think she would just enjoy it, even not necessarily in like, oh look it's me, like narcissistic kind of way, but just appreciating the story in general. Okay, sorry if the angle's a little bit different, my camera died. Next up we have Artemis, who is the virginal goddess of the hunt, the moon, and wild nature. For her I chose Woman World. In this comic, men go extinct, and it's just women left on the earth doing their thing. And Artemis isn't known to like tolerate men at all. She's like low-key a man-hater, and this book isn't man hate, it's more like woman love. It doesn't say a lot of bad things. It mostly focuses on the positive of like a woman world and feeling safer, I guess, sometimes. So I think that'd be a healthier point of view for Artemis to take it from. Does that make any sense? Next up, I have Nike, the goddess of victory, and for her I have chosen Dear Martin. The main character Justice works insanely hard to get where he does. Nike is not only the goddess of victory, but she also really admires hard work, and I think that was definitely evident in this book. Also in Dear Justice as well, Quan has a similar sort of attitude. And yeah, both great books, honestly. Next up is Leto, goddess of motherhood, and for her I chose Nothing to See Here. This book focuses on raising children that like spontaneously light on fire, semi-spontaneously, and they're being raised by a sort of nanny slash governess, and she's never been a mother, and she had like, and she doesn't have the greatest relationship with her own mother, and so it's kind of a lot about like motherhood or parenthood. even though the main character isn't the mother of these children, she's still the caretaker of them, and she's still the one that kind of cares the most about them. It's an interesting story, it's sweet, it's dark, and I don't think you have to be a mother in order to enjoy like the relationships that are focused on in this one. It's just a really good book in general. Next up for Iris, Goddess of the Rainbow and Messenger of the Gods, I chose Normal People by Sally Rooney. I think this would be one of those books where it's kind of like a hate-love thing with her. Like, she's just so frustrated about the lack of communication in this book that she's like, wow, mortals are so freaking weird. Next up, she's not specifically a goddess, but she's one of the muses, and that is Talia, the goddess of comedy and pastoral poetry. And for her, I chose Anxious People. If you don't happen to know what pastoral poetry is, like I very much didn't until planning this video, it's poetry about like pastures and like cows and shit, which I'm down with. I think it's like low-key cottagecore vibes, but I don't know. This book doesn't necessarily like emanate cottagecore, but I think it is really funny. It's also is kind of dark. It's intense. Overall, it's just about people living their lives. There's a bank robbery sort of thing, but it's not like full-on heist mode. It's a lot about people and like humans just interacting with each other and stuff like that. There's a lot of funny moments in it, but I think a good majority of it is probably dark humor. I still think Talia would appreciate it anyways because it's also just really well written, and even though I don't think it's like pastoral poetry, it's prose, but it's very poetic in that. Next up is Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, the home, domesticity, cleanliness, and family. And for this, I chose Little Women. Little Women is a story about the four March sisters kind of growing up. It starts like early teens, I think, and it goes on later. It's a really sweet story, and it's just a lot about like familial bond and stuff like that, and friendship as well. I think she would read this like at least annually, just like sitting by the fire, chilling, reading her book, you know? Next up is Hecate, the goddess of magic, moons, crossroads, the undead, ghosts, all that jazz. And for her, I have chosen Mary Ventura and the Ninth Kingdom. It's so good. It's so good. I've read this twice now in like the past month, and I think it's fantastic. It's kind of eerie, but just like really cool, and I think Hecate would really vibe with it. I can't talk more about it because it's such a short story that most of anything that I would say would be a spoiler, but I highly recommend that you read it if you just feel like breezing through something really quick. It's a super fast read, and it's really good. Next up is Persephone, the goddess of vegetation and spring, and she's the queen of the underworld. For her, I have chosen The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Little side note, Persephone and I have the same favorite flower, which is a daffodil, and that just makes me happy. In the title, it says flower, and I feel like that's kind of like cool. Persephone was raised in the mortal realm, so separate from everyone else who was raised on Mount Olympus, and I think she kind of feels a little bit like an outsider because of that. And this is like a really intense book, but it's about being an outsider in love and loving yourself, and I think she would just really connect with it. And because she was raised in the mortal realm and spent more time with them than most of the other gods and goddesses, I think she just knows a lot about the human condition and can relate a lot to them, and because of that, I think she would also vibe with pretty much any Alice Oseman novel. So yeah. Next up is Ate, the goddess of mischief, delusion, ruin, and folly. And for this, I've chosen Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is a heist book, and obviously there's some mischief in here. There's hijinks and heists and all that jazz. And I think she would just kind of enjoy it and like cheer them on, being like, yeah, steal that shit. Honestly, she'd be cheering Kaz on the entire way. The last goddess and last book is Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth. And for this, I have chosen The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Addie LaRue is basically immortal, and so I think that kind of fits. There's a lot more to her story. She's forgotten, like, basically the second someone takes their eyes off of her. But she leads a really interesting life, and I think a lot of that is because she's had so much time to explore everything. And I think Hebe would just be like, hey, cool. So those are all of my theorized favorite books of the goddesses, and I had a lot of fun with this video. I love Greek mythology and just general mythology, and so this is always a fun thing for me to do. If you have any more groups of like people that you want me to do, I was thinking about doing like favorite books of the Grishaverse characters and stuff like that. So let me know if there's anything in particular you would like to see. If you want to follow me on anything, it'll all be down below, and I've been using Storygraph more than Goodreads lately, so check that out if you want to see what I'm reading. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I will see you soon.